Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in tonight. We are glad to have you. I'm Bryan Koch, lead pastor at GT. I'm with Scott Nagle today, who is our student ministries pastor, does a great job. And what we do on these podcasts is we just want to kind of recap the message that we've heard, dig a little deeper. And it was such a great word that Scott brought to all of us. I know he was speaking to 2020 grads, but you know what? I'm just going to say for myself, it spoke to me powerfully. The things that we're learning from the life of Abraham in this faithful series. So Scott, welcome, man. It's good to have you with us today. I love just a lot of the things you shared, the whole baton thing. So tonight, let's just dig a little deeper on transitions. Whether you're a student, we know they're having a lot of transitions and the way the whole COVID-19 deal is going. So let's just talk about that tonight and just share whatever's on our heart about it.
Yeah, thanks, Pastor. I think when I first started approaching this weekend's message, I knew we were talking to grads, but I also knew that the reality we face right now is that it doesn't matter what phase of life you're in. We are all facing a transition of some sort.
That's right.
And we all face them throughout our lives. I mean, the only thing that's constant in life is change. And
that's exactly right.
I kind of jokingly described it as, here in Pennsylvania, I mean, I don't think it dawned on me until I really sat down to think about how much our life changes, but our life changes so drastically much just from season to season.
It does.
For instance, we're recording this, and then this is going, this is obviously June when we're recording this. So, in my house, I'm looking out, my neighbors across the street are putting in a pond, like in the front yard, a little tiny thing. But 6 months from now or 9 months from now, they'll be same guy will be outside shoveling snow.
Yeah.
And our lives totally changed. And so
I love what you said in the message, on Sunday, like how cool, like you live in Pennsylvania, you live in seasons. Like there's a time you're outside eating Plum Creek and there's a time you're not. And it really is. There are a lot of seasons in our life for sure.
Yeah. And so I thought, obviously there are major milestone transitions that happen in your life, a graduate who graduates from high school moving to college.
Right.
But if you have kids, and I mean, you remember this from when your boys were young,
yeah.
Like if your kids go, so like my kids went to go to public school,
right.
There's a big transition from when we went from having, kindergarten half day, they still come home and take a nap, to like, right. They go to first grade and they're in school all day. Then you hit, in my school district, you hit the end of fourth grade, and now you've got a fifth grader who's going to middle school. And my son just finished his eighth grade year in middle school and is about to step into high school. Yeah. So there are all these major transitions. And so in the middle of this faithful series that you kicked off so brilliantly last weekend, I thought it was a good time to talk about the fact that we're all in a series of transition. And so what can we do, and how do we prepare ourselves for the transitions?
Yeah. And before we dive into that, you talking about my boys made me think of a story when they were growing up, and they homeschooled for a while, then they transitioned into high school. But I remember one summer, which was a great transition. School is over, now we're into summer, and Bryson then got a job, and they got up the first morning. They're excited, man. 5:30 in the morning, they went. They were making good money, and they're like, he said to me, like, Dad, I could do this the rest of my life. I don't even know if I need to go to college. I can do this the rest of my life. Well, about 4 days into it, when I went into his room at 5:15 and said, hey, pal, it's time to wake up and go to work, he's like, oh man.
Yeah.
I said, so you can do this the rest of your life? I said, life is, full of seasons, right?
Right.
And so this certainly in the COVID-19 has been a season. This is a significant chapter. None of us started 2020 thinking, we wouldn't be having road trip this year. We wouldn't be doing graduations, virtual this, Zoom, everything. You said on Sunday, Zoomed out. Who would have ever thought? And so it is an interesting season of transition for sure.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that that I'll just say personally, I've been struggling with this current thing is that depending on where you're watching or who you're talking to, and depending on where they live, for instance, in the United States, it's a different level of, what their transition looks like. So for instance, my sister and my parents live in West Virginia.
Right.
They have 15 confirmed cases of COVID-19 as of today in their entire county. As of today, we have 4,213. Now, again, by the time this watch, those numbers are going to change, but there's over 4,200 in Berks County right now. Yeah. So like when I talked to her on the phone, she's like, yeah, Scott, you just got to realize it's different. I mean, their football team was practicing. She drove by and saw it the other day,
right.
And so.
Well, and isn't that true? It's just like how it works in our life from person to person.
Right.
You think about all the seasons we go through, and it's not just seasons of graduating, getting married, getting a job. It's seasons of, hey, the doctor said this, or this is what took place. I mean, you said in your message Sunday, we've used that word a lot. You got to pivot. Well, there's been a lot of huge pivots in both of our lives, and those who are watching as well. So, you could be going through a season of sunny and 70, and I may be going through a season of, man, I can't wait till this is over.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another thing that's interesting you say that, like when we talk about transitions, it can be very individual, and it can be very much where you are in life for yourself personally. I used to say to my boys all the time, like, it was funny, like Ben's getting ready to get married. This was years ago, him and Jen. And, they were dating. It depended, like if Brenda and Ray were having a better dinner, they'd eat with them. If they liked what we were having, they'd eat with us. And I said, man, you're kind of in an interesting season, Hoss. I mean, you just kind of go wherever. And then I'll never forget it. He came in that night to the house, and he looked in our pantry. He said, man, there's nothing to eat here. And I said, Ben, you know what's so awesome? I said, you're getting ready to go into a season of life. You're going to transition into a time where you never have to worry about that again. Because everything in that pantry, you're going to put there.
That's right.
A month after he was married, he stopped up to Lynn and I, and he said, man, you guys got so much food. I said, isn't it amazing what seasons of life speak to you about transition? So just.
Well, yeah. And you, of course, with a house full of boys, my son just turned 14. And so like his new line, famous line in our house is, I'm always hungry. Like, hey, you want to eat? He's like, I can always eat,
Yeah, I would literally my last little story here. I'll never forget Bryce. Bryce would get half a gallon of ice cream out, and I'd think, when's he going to get the bowl? Oh, that is his bowl. Or the family-sized bag of chips. He thinks that's like a snack bag. So, so you're in that season, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so, we're talking about transition, Pastor Bryan. You opened opened our series with the Faithful series, talking about a little bit about your story. And when I knew we were going to be talking about transitions tonight, one of the questions I want to ask you is if you wouldn't mind walking through some of the transitions you've been through and some of the new things. So people that are watching from our church, maybe they don't know, just some of the things that have had to change, in your life.
Well, I was Sunday morning when you were speaking, I was thinking about the 2020 grads, and I thought, man, my heart has been broken for them that they missed their senior year. You talk about they couldn't run track, they didn't play sports. I mean, that's tough. I was thinking, and if that would have happened to me my senior year, I would have just been horrified. So my heart and prayers go out to our students for sure. But I was thinking of the students and how quickly, and I've often said, life can change just like that. Mm-hmm. And part of the story I didn't share 2 weeks ago was as a student. So I'm a senior at Muhlenberg High playing baseball. We graduate from Muhlenberg on a Thursday night, the normal graduation. I was just thankful that I graduated. That was a good season in my life, and I'm grateful for that because I wasn't the best student always. But so I graduate on Thursday night. Friday is the MLB draft. So I'm sitting by the phone. I'm, set to go to Arizona State, or if it doesn't work out, but I really didn't want to do that. I wanted to play ball. And the phone rang. And I'll never forget this quick transition. The phone rang at 10:30 Friday night, and I was drafted by the Chicago White Sox. Mm-hmm. They said on that short phone call, literally 7 minutes, Bryan, we drafted you. Congratulations. We're going to fly the guy in on Saturday, talk through your contract. If that works out, Monday we'll have you down in Florida in spring training.
Wow.
Bam, bam, bam. Yeah. And I thought, man, what amazing transition. So fast forward 3 years, I'm playing ball, I'm trying to do the transition, single A, double A, rookie bowl, make my way. That summer, I went to the show. In the end of spring training, I went up to the show 2 days. I was like, wow, this is crazy. I got these guys' baseball cards, and here I'm sitting on the bus.
Wow.
Back to the Niagara Falls White Sox in New York. I'm up to bat. One pitch later, get hit in the face. That quick, my life is over. So I was thinking, like in my life, and it's funny you say that, because for me, in my life, my transitions have been like quick. Boom, you get drafted. Boom, you get hit. Boom, you're on a motorcycle ride, and boom, you hit a drunk driver in a bad curve. So for me, and I know everyone's transitions are different, but it just out of nowhere. It's like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
And that's what I've experienced in my life a lot of.
So what, obviously the loss of Lynn, but then you've since, you've sold your house and you built a
Yep.
house that's kind of contoured towards you.
Mhm.
What are some of the physical thing? I guess I'm asking because
Yeah.
you and I've had these conversations. Like
Yeah.
these are the things I'm curious to know as a congregant.
Yeah.
So like, what are some of the physical? Like, what are you physically dealing with now?
Well, yeah, like it's crazy. There are still days like, I'm 5 years on June 7th, but there's just like, there's days I'm sitting there doing whatever and I rub my leg and realize I don't got a leg.
Wow. Yeah.
And, you know, that's just kind of bizarre. Or, the transition of not being able to play racquetball. If it's raining, I'm not going to run to my car. I'm just going to walk in the rain. So there's just these little things. Obviously, there's been huge transitions on walking, on putting my
Yeah.
leg on, of just everything you can imagine. But I will say this, and it's the good thing that God helps us. It says in 1 Thessalonians 5:24, faithful is he who called you, who also will do it. And God has been so faithful. I mean, even here in your message on Sunday, God is totally faithful.
Right.
And so I've seen that on every turn. I mean, yeah, there's days it's not easy. There's days I got pain in my leg. It's difficult. There's just days I'm like, gosh, when I see my boys and I think about not having Lynn and they don't have their mom. Yeah, those are tough days. But I can honestly say God truly has been faithful to me big time.
Do you, again, this is just
Yeah, no, it's good.
Amputee question. Do you put your leg on every day?
Well, it's interesting. I'll just say during this pandemic, like right now, I don't got my leg on. But you wouldn't know that,
Right.
But
Right.
I'll just put it up there. Let me see. There it is.
Yeah, oh, wow. Okay.
There it is. So, and people often say to me, it's funny, man, I don't think about your leg. Well, I think that's really weird. I think about it like every day.
Sure.
When they don't. And I know guys the years past that were amputees. I didn't think about it, but so it's been good for me in some ways not to have to wear it 16 hours a day.
Sure.
It's kind of like a young girl or mom, whoever, says, oh, these shoes, I love them, but I can't wait to take them off.
Right.
And there's days for me when I'm like, I love this leg. I thank God for it, but you know what? I'm ready to take it off.
Yeah.
So
now, do you, 5 years later, do you still go to therapy for your leg or is it just checkups?
No, I'm done with therapy. Yeah, once in a while I'll check up. I go for manual physical and those other things, but I don't really. It's funny, my leg, the leg that I have that was the prosthetic, it's like an iPhone. Mm-hmm. So, you spend a fortune for them, but they only last about 7 or 8 years, and then you got to get a new model. Okay. So I have a Plie 3, and I'll eventually get the Plie 4, I suppose. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't go for regular checkups, therapy. I'm, kind of where I'm at. In your leg, you think about transitions, you think about how life changes. Mm-hmm. The stump that I have, like, you don't use it. I don't use my quad. I don't use my hamstring. Mm-hmm. Not that I had a lot of hamstrings before that happened, but your leg begins to shrink. And I just think of like our listeners, like you just think about how life goes. And, I think even for some of our students graduating saying, what's going to be next? Like, am I going to have college? Am I not going to have college? You mentioned that in your message. What about my job? How's that going to change? And all those things. It's sometimes I think where it's hard for us to be faithful is to think, can I trust God with my unknown future? Like, what's really going to happen? And there's days I think about that. I'm thinking, okay, I'm 56. What about when I'm 80 and I got to strap that leg on? So I think that's something that we really have to focus on, of trusting God through those times.
I challenged our student leaders this past week. I was talking about leadership, but I think it applies to faith too, that I think faith in leadership is like a muscle. And the thing about a muscle is that it never gets stronger without resistance or without tugging.
That's right.
And, when I think of transitions, like someone graduating from college, or like, you're obviously their transition probably isn't as dramatic as the one you faced,
Right.
But again, it's always in the eye of the beholder, right?
That's
and
right.
So, like you
exactly
said, with one person's sunny and 70 is someone else. And so I was thinking that, like, during transitions, it's that tension that causes growth.
Yeah, that's right.
Without, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, my thought is, if I can put words to it, is without tension, there is no growth.
No, that's exactly right. And you think about this. Let me ask you a question in regard to student ministries, GT kids, a church. Think of that. I always remember, like with me, that first step. I'll never forget 51 days later, for the first time in 2 months that I even stood up on one leg because my hips were so messed up. And sometimes taking that first step. So talk a little bit to our listeners, maybe moms and dads who are listening, whose kids are getting ready to take that step from kids ministry into student ministry. That's a big transition.
It is. It's a big transition, and it can be scary. And I think the first thing I suggest to parents about any transition when you're a parent is you need to educate yourself, right? And so like when you've done all of your transitions, and I know because I've had conversations, like you educated yourself of like I remember having conversations with you even through like deciding where you were going to live, you know, looking at what works for you. And I've been to your house and had the house tour where you're like, yeah, we put this kind of handle on because it'll be easier. And
that's exactly right.
And so I think talking to a fifth grade parent, the first thing I would say is educate yourself on what is coming up, you know. And there are some things that are different. I think I do think between kids ministry and student ministries at GT Church, our similarities far outweigh our differences.
That's cool.
Both, obviously, it's a little bit different right now because we're not meeting in person. But when we meet in person, GT Kids has worship time, has a message, an age appropriate message, has a small group time, and all of those things also happen in student ministries. It just looks a little bit different because our students are a little bit different. You know, we can't teach a 6-year-old the same way we teach a 16-year-old.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's the reason we have student ministries in the first place, because we also believe that we can't teach a 16-year-old the way we teach a 66-year-old.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
45-year-old. And
context,
so I think for parents, the first thing is education. And so, and if you're watching and your parents, just know that as a church, we will be communicating with you when it comes, depending on when you're watching this, because I know this will stay around for a while. So year to year, our transition programs look a little bit different depending on what current realities we're facing.
Right.
So, but I do know this, that our goal is to communicate with parents as early and as often as possible.
Yeah, and I love what you said about, because it kind of hit me like that there's not as many differences as you would think. And we do worship, we do large group, small group. There's a lot of conversation so kids don't have to be fearful. Man, I'm in this big group, and it's kind of like when you go from junior high to senior high, and you were the big guy on campus, and now you're the freshman at the high school. But you break it into gender-based groups, and they're talking about things that are really meaningful. And I think I know when my boys went through that, it was so helpful to know that.
Yeah, and our goal is are gender-based, like you said. Our small groups in student ministries are gender-based and grade-based. And there's a difference between kids ministry and student ministries at GT, is that in student ministries, we encourage and challenge our leaders to stay with their small groups until they graduate from high school. So we're in the middle of grad season right now. This last weekend, we celebrated grad weekend at our church as a part of the service. And so I have 5 small group leaders that have been walking with their students through.
So good.
Some of them have joined a little bit later than others, but we have, for instance, Lori and Mary have been walking with their girls since they were in the 6th grade. And so they've been walking through with their students. And that's our goal. Our goal in student ministries is to put a caring and loving adult alongside of a student who can do life with them throughout their high school career. And
it makes me think, like, I think it's Psalm 71. I don't have it right in front of me, but Psalm 71, the psalmist is saying, God, like, don't forget me when I'm old and gray. And I often read that and I say, you know what, I'd give anything for gray. Like, don't forget me when I'm old and bald, Lord. But I was thinking, man, as I saw Sunday, I saw those kids' pictures coming up. And gosh, I remember when they were kids, we're in the nursery, and I'm thinking, when you talk about transitions, one of the things I often say is the days sometimes go slow, but I want to tell you the years go fast.
Yeah.
You look back and say, like, where did that go? I said on the Sunday I preached to kick off this series, like, there's days it feels that transition, that accident, losing Lynn, my leg. Some days it feels like it's 5 minutes ago.
Right.
And then there's some days it feels like it's 50 years ago. And that's a big part of transition because you feel different things. And when I saw those students' pictures, their grad pictures going up, and I'm like, what in the world? Like, where did the time go?
Yeah, when I got to proof the video last week during the week before the weekend service, and as I've seen these seniors and even college seniors, like, I'm remembering back. So one of our college kids who graduated, Gardini, I remember going to fine arts with her in Orlando 6 years ago. I remember, a couple students, just walking through. And so it is, yeah, it's crazy. And I think what the thought that came to my mind when you're talking about that, the when you're in the middle of it, it seems long, and when you look back, I kind of feel like that's the power of perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that I think perspective always gives us like the ability to see more than what we can see at the time.
Right.
And I sometimes think we need to encourage ourselves when we're walking through a new season that at that moment we don't have the power of perspective.
Right.
But we need to, but I almost think we need to live our lives and take the steps that we need that will give us the best perspective when we look back.
See,
so
that is so good.
Yeah.
And I'll just tell you how that affects my story. So you mentioned earlier, like when I was living in Leesport and right near you,
yeah,
the perspective I had was everything I looked at was a reminder of what I've lost.
Mm-hmm.
The pool, the kitchen. I mean, honestly, I've shared the story that when the washer and dryer would go off, Lynn didn't let me touch the washer. The lawnmower, yes, I could rake the leaves, but don't touch the laundry, right? But when that would go off, and after the accident, I just, and I'm not a crier, but man, the tears would just come. And so it's so good what you said about perspective, because man, when I'm going into this new home, I'm going to build new memories with my boys. There's going to be new days. And I think that's really important. And I really think it would be good for the parents to hear, because you're going to be going through this season, because one of the things that made it hard in my transition was I went from being married, having a wife, 3 kids at home, busy, church, all that, not to like just me.
Right.
What a transition.
Right.
You and Lisa are headed for that transition where they're going to start moving out.
Yes.
I would love for you to talk a little to parents that are thinking, man, I remember when my kid was this little, and now they're going to be going off to college or a career. They're going to be doing something. And even for you as a student ministry pastor, like I've pastored some people for 34 years.
Yeah.
How is it for you, like when kids are with you for 4 or 5 years and now they transition and now?
Yeah, it's sad and celebrating all at the same time. I think you just like a parent, I mean, as a pastor or a leader or a teacher for that matter, like, our role is to help prepare students for what's next in their life. And when they succeed, we succeed. And interesting, I've been a youth pastor now for 22 years, I think now. And so one of my students in my first youth group is now the like worship and service programming pastor of the church that I was at staff at. And I watch him and I'm like, so he's on like an executive leadership team of a church. And I still remember the 8th grade kid, who we were going to the mall and getting pizza, and hanging out. And so,
think of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it is tough, but what I would say to parents is this, the goal is that we develop students that follow Jesus in their 20s.
Right.
And so I've never gotten hung up on the family that comes to me and says, you know what, my kid decided to sit in the worship center.
Yeah.
Great. Do they love Jesus? Are they coming to church? Are they following him? That's awesome. That's great. But the goal, the long-term goal as a dad, so let me speak as a dad for a minute. I kind of have 2 goals for my kids in my mind. Number 1 is I want them to know Jesus. I want them to love Jesus.
Right.
And number 2, I want to be their friend. Like I want them to actually want to be my friend. And I've had these conversations with my kids, Mar and Micah, of, when you get older and you get married, I want us to have a friendship relationship. And this is a thing for parents I've been saying for years, which is parents have to transition through this season from as their kids are graduating from, when your kid is a little and a toddler and even in elementary school, you are, I call it the God voice in their life, right? Yeah. Whatever you say goes, and you're kind of like, because I said so works, all the time. And then as they become teenagers and you say, because I said so, the toddler word why seems to come back as they become teenagers. Right. But the transition, I think, has to move. Parents need to move from being the God voice in their life to being a trusted confidant and friend.
That's right.
And if that transition,
those are important transitions, man.
Oh yeah. And if those transitions don't happen in a healthy way, a bunch of things could happen.
That's so true.
You know, you could, if that doesn't happen in a healthy way, you could have kids that decide they don't want to talk to you anymore.
That's exactly right.
You could also have kids that never decide to leave home ever. I mean, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I want to be real careful when I say that. But, you know, I remember when I came to work here, when I came to work for you, my mom and dad lived in Allentown. So it's about an hour away. So I stayed with them for a couple months because I wanted my family to make a wise choice on the house we were going to buy.
Right.
And I remember the joke I always said is, you know, 36 years old, living in my parents' basement, living the dream, you know? And so at the time I joke about it, but it was okay for me because I had my own life, you know, I wasn't still, you know. So,
well, you know, it's funny, like when I had the accident and I was moving to this house, they were building the house. And so I had a couple months where I had to go back home. Now, I leave the house when I'm 17 years old to play with the White Sox. And I have not been back since.
Yeah.
So now going back as a 52-year-old, I'm like, is this going to work?
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. My mom's cooking me nice meals at night and whatever. And so I said to my dad one night, I started messing with him. I said, hey, Dad, I said, this got to tell you something. You know, I'm building this new house, but I'm kind of liking it here. I think I'm just going to rent that out and I'm going to stay with you and Mom. How's that? He goes, yeah, okay, let's talk about that. I think what I would say, like you talk about kids transitioning out, one of the transitions I've seen is that, you know, Proverbs 22:6 says, raise up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he won't depart from it. Now, that doesn't mean that a kid never steps off the path. That doesn't mean a kid doesn't do something maybe for more than just taking a step. Maybe they go years off the path.
Yeah.
Our job as parents is to raise our kids. I know we do that in GT Kids and students. We want them, when they make decisions on a Friday night by themselves, we want them to make it according to the Word of God. Yeah. It's not just yes, no. It's not talking to them like a toddler. Now you're their friend. Now you want them to live their life for God. But I can honestly say during our transition, I'll never forget, like you think, I remember one time, like Ben got his license and Lynn and I are going somewhere and Ben, Bryce, and Brett are in the car driving somewhere to get a burger. And I'm like, okay, how does this happen? How do you have these kids that, you know, and now they're all driving in a car by themselves, all right? But when I saw, for example, how Ben had stepped up during my accident, I mean, he went from being a young guy to a man like overnight. Like he had to make some major decisions about my life, power of attorney, could lose his mom and dad in one instance. So I just would say to encourage the parents, sometimes it's hard to see your kids go off to school, move to another state, do something. But I want to tell you, it's kind of like what you said. It's hard, but it's celebratory when you step back and say, man, you know, my kids really are doing what they need to be doing. And so it's encouraging that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we can celebrate with them, like that's the dream, right? The dream is that we can sit back and celebrate with them. And from a student ministries standpoint, when you were saying that, our goal is always to come alongside parents. I remember I had a parent, this is years ago when I was a junior high pastor, who came to me one day and said, you know, my kids won't come to your junior high group because our family devotions can't compete with your services. And I broke my heart because here's a student who lost out on the possibility of having other people invest in their life.
No kidding.
You know, yeah, so it was crazy. And so now, to be fair, those boys are like 30 now. So I mean, you know, but it just, you know, the thought that was kind of the driving force for me, and that was the aha moment day when I said, no, my job is to come alongside parents. And not to be the parent for them. And in some cases we are the spiritual parent.
Yeah, right.
But it's another voice in a student's life.
It's so powerful. And we say that a lot in G Team 60. And I've seen it firsthand where we can say stuff to our kids, our boys, sons and daughters over and over and over. But all of a sudden you'll say it, or Candy will say something. It's like, oh, they need that other voice. And that's kind of how we are. You know, we hear the same thing, but like sometimes that's how God speaks to us too, through there's wisdom in a multitude of counsel. And so it really is good to hear you say that.
It's funny you said that. My daughter just got home from a driving lesson today. She has her permit. So my 16-year-old daughter has her permit. And so we're getting her some driving lessons. And
your prayer life is going to increase. Also.
Oh, listen, it's definitely started. And so, yes, absolutely. But they came home, and I can't remember what they were saying, but the words from Lisa, my wife, was, yeah, he was saying the same thing we've been saying. And so Mara finally was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. So
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, it's funny too, and this will be kind of the last thing I talk about, but like it really is funny when you talk about transitions. They're little, you're saying, no, don't do that, don't do this, or, hey, and then you're friends. And I can honestly say, like with my boys, I just love being friends with them. When they went off to college, I missed them. Lynn and I would sit there, we'd watch something, and I'd say, man, that would crack Ben up. But now watching my son raise his boys, it's funny when I talk to Jen sometimes, like, it's amazing, like what you say and how you parent, it really impacts what they do and how they are. I remember as a kid, one of my dad's favorite lines was, you go into a room, bloop, on goes the light. When you go out of the room, don't forget to turn off the light. I remember Jen saying to me when Ben and Jen got married, that Ben started that. Man, she goes, Ben, we only have 2 lights in our apartment. Okay, so I can't turn them all off. So it is interesting to think of all the things as parents that we've spoken into our kids in student ministry. It is interesting when you see them living it out. And now, like you said, I love what you said in the message, man. That faith that does nothing, that doesn't pass it on to the next generation. I was in the chat saying, man, go for it. That is awesome. We want to be keychain leaders. I want GT to become younger. I want it to become stronger. It's not just like it be around 100 years. I thought it was so good, the message you brought in. So why don't you just wrap up with that thought, Scott?
Sure.
Because I thought that was so powerful what you said.
Yeah, if we don't hand leadership off, eventually we will die, because our church will become old, and so one of the challenges, one of the leadership challenges that we always face, and no matter what business you're in, you always face this.
That's right.
Unless you're okay with whatever you're leading ending with you, then you have to be aware and you have to approach.
That's right.
And so,
and that's a big part. Think of sports. That's think of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Right.
One day Roethlisberger is not going to be there.
We know. They've been trying to find his replacement. It's not going real well. But yeah. So the idea of, who is coming behind you, and who is, and how are we passing leadership on? How are we passing meaningful leadership on to the next generation? And it's one of the things I love. One of the things I love about our staff is that we're not afraid to bring someone young in to say, hey, so in student ministries, we're looking to make a hire sometime soon. I think it's sure that.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the things I'm looking for, and I think you've been in a couple conversations with the executive leadership team, is that I want someone younger.
That's right.
Because I want someone with a fresh eye and a fresh face.
Different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we need to continue to get younger. And like you said about keychain leadership, like we need to continue to develop leaders coming behind us who can take significant pieces of ministry and run with them and succeed with them.
Yeah.
And the beauty of leadership is you win when they win.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's like a spiritual pyramid scheme almost. I mean, you win when they win.
That's right.
And so,
Scott, talk to me about with that. So let's say I'm watching tonight and I'm a sophomore, I'm a junior in high school. Some of my graduating seniors are going on to the next season of their life.
Sure.
Talk to the students that may be listening, or the parents that may be listening, about what their son or daughter can do to kind of step up into the GT student ministry role.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. The first thing is get involved and become a regular. I mean, you can't lead something you're not a regular attender of.
That's right.
So obviously first thing is become regular attender. Next thing I would encourage you, if you're watching this and you have a student in high school, reach out to me. We kicked off, one of the changes that have happened through COVID-19 is we've kicked off student leader groups over Zoom. So I currently host 3 student leader groups over Zoom. They happen on Thursdays throughout the day for different age groups and genders and that kind of thing. And so if you have a son or daughter and they're interested in being a part of student leadership, reach out to me. You can reach out to me by, you can just go to the church website and find us and send an email to GTSM. And I'll just kind of, what we're doing in student leadership right now is we're working through leadership books together as a group. So we started with a book called Lead Like Jesus that our entire staff is working through. We just wrapped up Kill the Spider, which is there you go. We just wrapped up Kill the Spider, and I can't reach behind me far enough, but our next book is I don't know what this is, but our next book that we're kicking off in July is John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Nice.
So my thought for student leaders, my goal is, we started this because, there was a vacuum in a time, and I've always tried to figure out how to do this, And what it has turned into for me is the passion of, it's a what if. What if when a student graduates from high school, because they've chosen to be a part of student leadership and have chosen to be, what if they could be 5 years ahead of their peers when it comes to leadership?
Wow.
Because we've invested and they've read and so we're looking, and I had to warn my groups this week. I said, listen, Kill the Spider, my girls groups especially are like, oh, this was such a great read. It was so easy to read. I said, okay, but our next book is a heavy leadership book. And so if you go to Google and you type in top leadership books, my goal is when a student would graduate from high school, if they're a part of student leaders, that they would have 6, 10, or 12 top level leadership books when they go and take leadership courses in college. They're going to go, oh, I already have it. It's marked up from when I was a sophomore in high school.
Yeah, that is so good. That is so good. That's powerful. Well, everyone that's listening tonight, you heard it. It's been such a good thing to have our student ministry pastor on, Scott Nagle. Man, if you missed his message from Sunday, make sure you check it out. It was so good, based on the series we're doing called Faithful. You won't want to miss it, man. Watch it with your kids. It was just a great word. But we thank you tonight for joining in. And as you heard him say, man, we're here to serve. We've been saying during this whole pandemic, GT has not been closed. Our mission is still being fulfilled. You talked about, the virtual groups we're doing. If you've got questions about student ministries, about the next step, leadership, and just reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you. We're looking forward to regathering when that day comes. And I thank God for technology now. And so thanks for taking time tonight to tune in with us. God bless you. Have a great rest of the week. This coming week, we'll do it again. And so glad to have you. Scott, thanks for joining us tonight. And it's good stuff, man.
Thanks, Pastor. Appreciate it. God bless everybody.
Yeah, God bless you all.